Business meeting of April 17th, 2025. Georgia, will you please call the roll for attendance?
Counselor Rosenthal.
Present.
Counselor Lewis.
Present.
Counselor Simpson.
Present.
Counselor Wong is running late. And, Counselor Nolan.
Present.
Counselor Wong is running late, as is Counselor Gonzalez and Council President Peterson.
Here, thank you. We have one change to our agenda today, resolution number 25-5466 for the purpose of adopting the fiscal year 2025 through 26 Unified Planning Work Program and certifying that the Portland metro area is in compliance with federal transportation planning has been removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. We'll move on to our public communication on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures that we will use for public communication?
If anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions tab. If you are using your phone, you can dial *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, please click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close for a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist. You can turn on your camera if you like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes. I'll manage a timer to go off when you begin, when the 3 minutes is up. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And Council President Peterson, we have one person who has signed up to testify in advance. Kate Mira, I'm going to promote you to a panelist now, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you, Georgia. My name is Kate Mira, and I am speaking to council today to urge you to rehire Chris Bergstrom as the Technical Production Service Manager for P5 Theaters and retain this position. I have been a stagehand with IATSE Local 28 for 19 years, though I am only speaking today as a concerned theater-savvy citizen. Having Chris Bergstrom in the position of Technical Production Service Manager has made my work environment and the P5 buildings better and safer. As a stagehand who works in all of the venues, I have noticed a marked change in morale and resources that make my ability to do my job easier. In the 19 years I've worked for the P5 venues, from almost a year backstage on Menopause the Musical to Hamilton multiple times at the Keller and hundreds of other shows, Chris has been the first in this position that I have witnessed to truly care about the people and the buildings, care about their maintenance and upkeep. It's embarrassing how wretchedly out of date much of the equipment at the Keller is due to decades of others in the Technical Production Service Manager position being more interested in keeping line items low rather than maintaining healthy theaters and consequently safe work environments. Chris has been the first I've seen who truly knows the industry and the P5 venues from his years with Horn Audio and touring, so has an excellent understanding of what improvements are necessary and helpful. Had Chris had this position during the pandemic, it is likely Metro would have easily saved $500,000 or more, as the theaters were unadvisedly unattended, so the water damage in the Keller sound room was not stopped or caught in a timely fashion and consequently had to be completely rebuilt, all of which could have been avoided. No one else I know of in the Metro management ecosystem, including members of this council, respectfully, truly understand the intricate needs or demands of our industry, or have experience in professional theater. Our work is unique, dangerous, difficult for those outside the industry to fully grasp. And consequently, it's important for everyone to have a trusted liaison, which should be the technical production service manager. And Chris has been doing an exemplary job. He has been instrumental in bringing the production department in under budget, while at the same time making sorely needed improvements to safety in the buildings and still saving P5 multiple thousands of dollars. Please reconsider the decision to fire Chris and eliminate this position. We are all better off with him in this job. Thank you. And thank you, Georgia, for all of your follow-ups. I really appreciate that.
You are very welcome. Thank you. Council President Peterson, I do not see anyone else who has signed up to testify today.
Thank you. Seeing no one coming forward and no more hands raised online, we'll close communication on non-agenda items and move on to the consent agenda. Councilors, we have 4 items on today's consent agenda. Resolution number 25-5485 for the purpose of confirming the appointment of 1 new member to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Consideration of the March 6th, March 13th, and March 20th, 2025 council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. I think motion has been made by Councilor Simpson and seconded by Councilor Rosenthal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear online. Councilor Nolan? Raised from Councilor Nolan. The motion passes. Thank you. We will now turn to the resolution, resolution number 25-5466 for the purpose of adopting the fiscal year 2025 through 26 Unified Planning Work Program and certifying that the Portland metro area is in compliance with federal transportation planning. Council, the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, is developed annually and documents metropolitan transportation planning activities performed with federal transportation funds. The UPWP also supports other regionally significant planning efforts. JPAC considered this resolution at their meeting this morning, which included significant discussion. I'd like to now turn it over to Councilor Lewis to provide an update on this morning's consideration of the resolution.
Sure. Thank you. This morning, JPAC met. We had our public hearing for RUFA, and then this was the other significant item on the agenda. The UPWP, as a reminder, is the way that we make sure that we can have federal dollars programmed in the state and in our region. And the discussion this morning actually deviated from just the plan to spend the dollars. But Commissioner Paul Savas of Clackamas County brought up his request in part of the MPO certification process to have a larger discussion around our membership and how JPAC is formed and situated as an MPO. That is a separate issue, but because it became entwined with the timing of this, we had 1 no vote this morning, and there will be continued conversations at the MPO level about what it means to have JPAC and Metro working together to act as our MPO. That said, nobody spoke against any of the specific projects listed, and there were not any comments about the UPWP outside of a general conversation around our governance model, which I am not putting anybody's words in anybody's mouths, believe might have been triggered by the words compliance with federal transportation planning requirements. I think there's a misunderstanding about UPWP as a standalone that is not part of our status as an MPO.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? We do have staff if there's any detailed questions. Catherine is with us, so thank you.
I'd like to have a little bit of a longer conversation with staff, just for the record, please.
Yeah, why not? Catherine, introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you very much, Council President Peterson and councilors. Nice to see you this morning. Thank you, Councilor Lewis, for that introduction. do you want to ask me a specific question or do you want me to just share a little bit of background? I'm happy to follow whichever feels
And
best.
introduce yourself for the record.
Oh, my apologies. I'm Catherine Chiarlo. I am the Director of the Planning, Development, and Research Department here at Metro.
Sure. I'd like you to start just by defining the UPWP, since I've tried to characterize it. Council President Peterson has characterized it, but if you could do it from the planning perspective, please.
That sounds great. In fact, Georgia, would you mind pulling up a slide? This is a slide that we've used internally, but I think it helps explain what the UPWP is. And if you could please go one slide before or after that. This is a 2-slide presentation. Yeah, thank you. So the Unified Planning Work Program is an annual requirement of the USDOT to describe how our federally funded planning work program will be coordinated. It's essentially a written report of the work that Metro does, TriMet does, ODOT does to spend the federal dollars that are programmed in various ways. It summarizes components. It in its own right does not make policy or funding decisions. It's a required submittal for receiving any federal transportation grants. This part is less relevant to you, but we did mention to JPAC this morning that the wording was reviewed in detail by TPAC earlier this month. The issue in question here is that the UPWP that was approved in the last round, which is not the one that was just discussed at TPAC, did describe how Metro and JPAC responded to previous certification comments from the federal government 4 years ago. So if we could then go to the next slide or possibly the previous slide, the other slide, thank you. The MPO certification process is separate but related to the UPWP. It's the federal agency review of our planning process. It happens on a 4-year scale. We, in the last few months, have been involved in discussions with the federal agencies around that recertification. Actually, when this agenda item was put together, we did not yet know if we were going to receive certification. Last Friday, we received a letter from the federal government, from the USDOT, letting us know that we are recertified, but that is brand new information. As part of that, that certification letter includes a couple of corrective actions and a few recommendations. Those corrective actions are actually not related to the representation issue at all. And the recommendations do have a few suggestions that this body and JPAC will need to consider and discuss and figure out how to resolve. But they are not yet reported on in the UPWP because the UPWP came before that certification. So we have not done any work on that. We just got it on Friday. So I think the title of the JPAC item was a little bit misleading by mentioning the MPO certification and caused some confusion in that forum. And I think it caused some confusion here as well. When you look at the resolution in front of you all, it actually does not talk about MPO certification. It just talks about approving this UPWP. And the last thing I'll say is that, again, it's on a separate, but unfortunately just concurrent in time, but a separate timeline. Our federal partners have encouraged us to get the UPWP in as quickly as possible, given the fact that it needs to be approved by the end of the fiscal year. And as we all know, things are pretty chaotic on the federal side right now. So they've asked us, which is why we kind of rushed it through JPAC and then today. They've asked us to get it through as quickly as possible. And because, again, it's not a policy-making document and it's something that TPAC had reviewed, we put it on consent. Happy to answer any more questions, but I think I'll pause there.
Councilor Simpson, did you have anything? Oh, it's somebody's hand raised. Councilor Rosenthal and then Lewis.
Yeah, just a sort of questions of confusion because I listened in on JPAC this morning and I still am not entirely sure. Will it be certified or will they request changes in the document? My understanding is they've asked for removal of certain kinds of wording, which we may or may not have had in the document regarding both climate change as well as potentially regarding diversity and things like that.
That's not this.
No, this
But-
is, right, oh, okay.
I know it's not this, but we may have wording in there that refers to it in terms of process. And so will that be something that they will be looking at? And then they have asked us, have they given us a timeline when they really want to see this move forward?
Yes, Counselor, thank you for the questions. This needs to be submitted and approved by the end of the fiscal year in order for Metro to receive transportation planning dollars and the transportation planning money that we receive to go out to our partners. So we are in a pretty tight timeframe. And the document we've submitted, we have done so for federal review. Again, that is separate from our certification process, but it is something that they need as part of our regular functioning as an MPO. They need each year to have submitted in a timely way. As we have done in the past, we've described things in ways that make sense in terms of the administration priority. We reviewed that language in the UPWP with TPAC. They are community and jurisdictional partners as represented there. We're fine, felt like it's a very accurate description of the work we're doing, so.
I guess my question is one of timing. Since the end of the fiscal year is when it's due, is there some idea that they may move more quickly before the end of the fiscal year if we get it? I mean, it's right now, it's mid-April. So there's still 2.5 months until the end of the fiscal year.
May I clarify? I believe you said
So-
our federal
Federal
partners,
fiscal.
our federal partners have
Is
asked
that-
for more time for review and approval.
So
And
that
so
they can
that's-
get it back to us.
It is not about when we turn it in at last minute. They're asking for it to be as soon as possible so that they have time to review.
Correct. Yeah. And if there are more specific questions around the timeline, I'm going to ask Ted Liebel to come on screen. He's remote but listening because I was not in those conversations. So I want to make sure I don't misrepresent. So if Ted could please join us, Georgia, if you could promote him.
But
Thank
this
you.
is not going to speed up the process under which they might allocate funds or move projects forward. Is that correct? That's still going to not happen until after the end of the federal, or it's all the beginning of the new federal fiscal year, regardless of what they're just doing it because they're in chaos and they don't know who's actually going to look at it.
I'm gonna let Ted answer that question because I don't want to speculate and he'll have a good answer. So.
Yes. Thank you for the question, Councilor Rosenthal. We are, what we have to have in place by the beginning of the fiscal year or by the end of this fiscal year is our new funding agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration to receive our planning funds. To get that process started, the FHWA and FTA have to approve this UPWP prior to us then getting that IGA in place, our funding IGA in place to fund these planning activities that are described in the UPWP. So FHWA staff have requested that we get them our approved UPWP approved locally this month, this April, in April, to give them enough time to review it and then approve it and get it back to all of us so that then we can start the funding agreement process.
Right. Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Just wanted to follow up the clarity around, is it our fiscal year or is it the federal September fiscal year that we need to be in by?
Yes,
gonna
sorry, that is our local fiscal year. So we need to have those funds in play. We need to have the agreement in place before July 1st so that the funds can come to us in our fiscal year.
Thank you for that clarity.
Any other questions for Catherine or Ted? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing none, do I have a motion for resolution number 25-5466?
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Counselor Simpson and seconded by Counselor Lewis. Any discussion, counselors? Okay, hearing none. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Nolan,
Yes.
Counselor Simpson,
Aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal,
Abstain.
Council President Peterson.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, council, we will now adjourn from our business council meeting and convene in a work session. We're going to have two work sessions. The first one is on the federal legislative agenda. The federal legislative agenda is made up of two parts, the legislative principles and the legislative priorities. Here to share the draft documents and update with feedback from councilor briefings. We have Betsy Emery, Federal Legislative Affairs Advisor. Welcome, Betsy.
Good morning, Metro Councilors. For the record, I'm Betsy Emery. I'm the Federal Affairs Advisor. And next slide. Today, I will be presenting a draft federal legislative agenda for your consideration and feedback. First, I will provide a brief overview of the 2024 federal election results and the local changes in our representation in DC. I'll also share some of new Congress and administration's priorities and their early actions. Then I will present the draft legislative values and principles that are included in the agenda. And lastly, I will close with a more detailed discussion about the specific legislative priorities that federal affairs staff will focus their advocacy on this Congress. Next slide. The November 2024 election changed the federal political landscape. Donald Trump was elected president and J.D. Vance is his vice president. The Republican Party is leading the 119th Congress, and this is a large shift in leadership from the prior Congress, in which Democrats controlled the Senate, Republicans controlled the House of Representatives, and a Democrat served in the White House. More locally, there are two new members of Congress representing the Portland metro region. After 29 years of serving Oregon's 3rd Congressional District, Earl Blumenauer retired from the House of Representatives. Former State Representative Maxine Dexter was elected to fill his seat and represent the Portland and Mount Hood area. Additionally, former State Representative Janelle Bynum replaced Lori Chavez-DeRemer to represent Oregon's 5th Congressional District. This includes portions of Milwaukee, Lake Oswego, and Clackamas County. The dynamics on Capitol Hill are very challenging right now. There are narrow margins in the House and Senate. In the House, both parties have to hold their entire caucus together to get the votes necessary for their item. In the Senate, the majority party needs 7 Democrats to join them to surpass the 60-vote filibuster and enact their policy priorities. All of this is very difficult, considering significant policy divides between both parties and differences that are emerging within each party as well. This is going to make it hard to get things done legislatively. Next slide. We are about 3 months into the new administration, and early actions are giving us a good sense of their priorities. It is clear that they are trying to reduce government spending by targeting federal funds. The new Department of Government Efficiency is leading these efforts and reviewing federal funding agreements, reducing the federal workforce, and eliminating programs and agencies that are considered unnecessary. There's also a lot of emphasis on immigration and actions to secure borders, deport undocumented people, and suspend refugee resettlement. Further, the 2017 tax provisions expire this year, and they are pushing to renew and expand those provisions in a tax package. This includes an effort to repeal clean energy tax incentives that were established under the Biden administration. Early actions also aim to expand oil and gas development, eliminate energy efficiency requirements, and reduce environmental regulations and permitting requirements. There is also an effort to use tariffs as a more expansive form of revenue. In recent weeks, a variety of different tariff rates have been applied on different goods and countries. Next slide. This political context informs Metro's federal legislative agenda. The agenda is divided into two sections. The first section defines Council's overarching values and policy principles for topic areas that align with our agency's work. These are meant to be evergreen guiding principles for legislative affairs staff to rely on as opportunities arise throughout the congressional session. The second document defines Metro's legislative priorities. These are session-specific legislative concepts that federal affairs staff anticipate movement on. The legislative priorities define the agency's federal advocacy goals and comprise a majority of the federal affairs work plan for the 119th Congress. Next slide. As I mentioned, the first part of the agenda defines Council's overarching legislative values. These values serve as a lens through which we approach all of our federal advocacy, and they reflect our agency's longstanding commitments. After meeting with many of you over the past month, there are a few additions this year. First, we've added a value related to maintaining adequate agency staffing and funding levels. This is in response to the large reductions in workforce we've seen at many agencies and concerns about potential downstream effects to our work and the region's priority projects. Also, in response to increased immigration enforcement, there is new language within our legislative values that specifically calls out support for immigrants. Next slide. A bit more targeted, the federal legislative principles are evergreen guiding principles that allow federal affairs staff to operate nimbly as bills and topics emerge during the two-year congressional session. There are 3 to 6 principles identified for each topic area in the agenda, and these principles reflect Metro's broader policy goals for each of our departments. We do not have time to go through each principle individually, but I've listed a few of them here to give you a flavor. Next slide. The proposed legislative priorities are the meat of the federal agenda. It is a narrow, targeted list of session-specific legislative concepts that federal affairs staff will prioritize and build strategy around. Given that the current tax package expires at the end of the year, there are a lot of negotiations underway about a new one. This is one of the biggest priorities on the Hill right now. The agenda defines 2 priorities for Metro to advocate for in that package. First, is to advance our longstanding legislative priority of reforming the low-income housing tax credit and increasing the number of private activity bonds that our state receives. There is broad bipartisan support for this, and I am hopeful that we will see movement. There are also discussions about imposing taxes on municipal bonds as part of a pay-for mechanism for the overall tax package. Municipal bonds are currently tax exempt, and as you know, are a critical financing tool for many local jurisdictions. Changing their tax exempt status would have dramatic effects. Congress also needs to negotiate a surface transportation reauthorization bill because the bipartisan infrastructure law expires in September 2026. These negotiations are already underway in both chambers, and federal affairs staff is working with JPAC to prepare a set of regional priorities that will guide our advocacy on this topic. Their draft priorities currently include support for maintaining level funding for key grant and formula programs. This includes specific reference to the FTA Capital Investment Grant Program, considering how many regional priorities are in its pipeline and will be seeking funding. It also includes support for emphasizing safety and multimodal investments over traditional road, bridge, and highway infrastructure. Another federal priority is to maintain federal support for the zoo's California condor breeding program. This program is a component of a larger endangered species recovery effort that is facilitated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The federal agency directs breeding and release activity support throughout all stages. The zoo also receives U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service funding for this program. Given the administration's efforts to reduce government spending and scale back environmental regulations, including those that are related to the Endangered Species Act, it feels especially important to advocate for the continued federal partnership in our condor program. Lastly, Metro is making a lot of progress in preparing remediation plans for Willamette Cove. This property has a complex web of Superfund designations with different state and federal cleanup requirements. As we finalize remediation plans for our property, we will need support navigating the federal regulatory requirements in order to fund and implement that cleanup project. Next slide. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this proposed legislative agenda and the specific priorities I've presented. Are there any that you would like to change or prioritize? Are there any additional topics that you would like to explore positions on? And with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Great, thank you. Counselors, any questions? Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the one item that I learned about last night is that, we are relatively undependent on federal funds here in this agency. However, a lot of our cities are dependent on various grants. There was a commerce grant that the city of Sherwood had been authorized for to buy an emergency vehicle. They've already committed some of the monies and that's been pulled. So I think one of our priorities needs to be support our local jurisdictions in their federal grants and the federal projects that they have depended on or that they've worked very hard for. So I just think that we need to call attention to that. They all have somewhat different things. Sometimes it's park funds, sometimes it's, various things, but I think we need to pay a bit more attention. And then we might also consider our concern about the SAVE Act, which is the Voter Suppression Act, which would affect how we do business in this state.
Thank you for that comment, Councilor Rosenthal. There is a legislative value. I think the very first value that is listed in the document is securing federal funding for our region. And I think a big component of that is working with our partners to both amplify the projects that either have been paused or the funding that may be rescinded from them, but also really trying to find new strategies to work within the new administration and the new system that we're living in to try to find new opportunities to advance those projects, despite there being a lot of changes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, and my point is in calling out that they have things that we aren't directly involved in, whether it's commerce grants and so forth, and maybe that involves a greater coordination with the League of Oregon Cities or AOC, and working with that. It's one of our regional responsibilities, I think. But thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not saying we've been ignoring it. I'm just saying that I just want to call attention to it because it came up yesterday.
Yeah. Thank you.
Counselor, any other questions? Counselor Simpson?
I mean, I think our priorities and our values are baked into this, and I think you gave us a overarching broad reach on things, but given the chaos and the volatility at the federal level, what's the likelihood that we have flexibility in what we're doing to continue moving forward with this agenda? What does it look like in 6 months if these things don't matter in the landscape that we're in?
Thank you for that comment, Councilor Simpson. Absolutely, I agree with you in that we are in a very different situation than we were even last December. Things are changing very dramatically and quickly at the federal level. And it is a bit of a roller coaster at times. And so I do think that we are really trying to make sure that we're creating space in terms of creating a more concrete strategy with clear tactics in terms of achieving these different priorities, and also really increasing the frequency in which we're meeting with our lobbyists and our congressional delegation. Been having a lot of meetings with them over the last 4 months, and really just trying to identify what are the opportunities, but also trying to build in an opportunity for us to pivot, because there was going to be a lot of pivoting over the next 4 years, and just as we navigate different rules, all the different things that are happening.
I mean, yeah, and I get that. That's why I asked, is there some space for you all to pivot or some flexibility as things shift and move in this ever-shifting landscape? Feels like in 6 months, what we're talking about today is going to look a lot different than it is now. So
yeah,
just want to ask that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I do think that the listing of our values is good and adequately covers what Councilor Rosenthal brought up in terms of what our local and regional needs are and receiving federal funds for them. The one addition that I would have comes in the priorities. And I've raised this with you before, Betsy, but since we are in the process working with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I believe it would be appropriate to say that we would like to see that agency adequately resourced to continue the transfer of the Willamette Falls locks to the local authority, so that those can be reopened.
Second that on Marine Drive. Forgot about that.
Oh, right, the levy.
Okay. Councilor Huang.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Betsy, for all the work you have to do every day in these times. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit more about CAPD and your process for taking in all the development and information, because it seems like things change constantly. And like, what is the system that you have in place to review like executive orders and other trends and things like that? I just want to make sure we're not like properly assessing kind of all the different changes and threats, and like nothing's like slipping through the cracks as much as we can. Like, yeah, is there a system that you all have?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of different ways that we are trying to manage that, but also really trying to beef up the level of coordination with our fellow partners at the various jurisdictions that are experiencing significant effects as well. And so we've stood up kind of a regional coordination group that's a little bit informal, but also does provide a biweekly space for just the federal government affairs folks at the various jurisdictions to be able to get together and share information about, you know, what directive came to you this week? You know, what memo have you seen floating around the agencies that you work within? And so that's a really great informational sharing space. Of course, we also have a contract lobbyist. Summit Strategies has represented us for probably nearly 10 years now. So they are very well aware of the different kind of workflows and priorities of our agency as a whole. And so they really help with tracking. And since the change in administration, we've increased the frequency of those meetings to make sure that, you know, every 2 weeks, we're able to do a rundown of what are you seeing on the Hill? What are the conversations underway? And we're lucky in that they represent a lot of different transportation-oriented agencies. And so they get a lot of information in a variety of ways, so that can help too. In terms of more internally, our council or our COO has stood up a work group that is assessing each executive order as it comes up. We have a big spreadsheet tracker that Jovian in the council office is doing an incredible job managing. And basically, yeah, that work group, we get together probably bi-weekly at this point and really talk about each one of them. OMA is doing an incredible job tracking the court piece, which is another hugely fluctuating component of things that are happening in terms of things get announced, they get sent to court. Lots of different things are being challenged in lots of different types of cases. And so they've been great at tracking that and making sure that that work group is well aware. In addition to a staff level work group, we've also stood up kind of a work group with directors. And I know that our council president and deputy are involved in those meetings as well in terms of trying to coordinate and really to share information, make sure everyone is aware of like what the current status is. I don't know if you want to jump in with any additions.
Thank you. Thank you, President Peterson and Council. That's a great rundown. The only thing that I would add is that we're also starting to open up channels with our community at Metro, especially employees who have regular interactions with community, who are on the front lines and are hearing, you know, different rumors or impacts or information. And so making sure that we're considering that in addition to kind of all the other structured pieces that Betsy just talked about. But as like new developments come in, we do a quick triage to determine whether or not it's something that directly impacts Metro or not. If not, we keep it on the list, but we kind of set it aside. If it if it is something that we believe will impact Metro, then we do further study and figure out exactly, how to respond. So there is a lot of information, and I think a lot of the changes recently, like in the last month, have been less executive orders and more kind of what Betsy was talking about, like different memos that are going out, or how the federal departments are implementing things that we're then saying, okay, does this impact us now? But generally speaking, I think the posture that we've taken is that unless a law is changing, we're not changing our policies. We're following the law. Our activities are lawful.
Thanks.
Counselor Lewis and then Counselor Rosenthal.
Oh, my hand is still.
Oh, okay. Counselor Rosenthal.
Yeah, Counselor Lewis's comment regarding the Corps of Engineer course and their ability to work on the levy issue is important. The other one that I heard, and I know we heard early on about both the loss of staff as well as some efforts to transfer all the FEMA responsibilities to the states. And I'm just wondering if there's anything more on that. We know that the recent issue in Washington, and we're members of the RDPO for the Regional Disaster Planning Organization, which depends a lot on its budget for some of its funding. I think it's called UTSI funding. But at any rate, do we know anything more about the trends in that regard?
That is something I would have to look into a bit more deeply to get a good kind of accurate response for you. So I'll make a note here to look more into the FEMA staffing and how that might play out for our work.
Incidentally, I just wanted to mention that your presentation to JPAC this morning was a very, very swift and very focused and very good.
Thank you. It's always a challenge to compress into 10 minutes. So I'm glad you were watching, listening, and enjoyed it.
Thank you. Counselor Nolan.
Thanks, Madam President. I'm interested not so much in the agenda, which is well contained here and highlighted appropriately, but how we're communicating with our constituents as well as our local government partners. The effects of the executive orders and the federal agency rules or declarations of intentions are sweeping, and mainstream media is not fully communicating that. Have you worked with our own communications folks to make sure that the people who are served by our specific services and more generally who benefit from our programs have an adequate understanding of the implications of the actions being taken?
Thank you, Counselor. I think that's a great question. I really focus on our relationship with other governments, so I'll pass it over to our COO to dive in on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Counselor Nolan. We have not communicated as much externally as we have internally. We have a regular schedule of email updates that we've been sending to our Metro community. And then we are also planning to have a town hall where we'll be talking about an all-staff town hall, two of them actually, talking about both the budget and answering folks' questions on the federal actions. We'll have frequently asked questions document that will go out. But I think it's worth discussing how we want to communicate as Metro externally, and I would really look to council for your direction on that, and however we can support you in that communication.
I think it's a conversation that needs to happen outside of this particular meeting, but democracy dies in silence. And since we are aware of and paying very close attention to the impact that actions at the federal level have on our ability to deliver the services we're committed to, as well as significant impacts on the values we've included in this federal legislative priority list. I would like us to find a way to make sure that democracy doesn't die in our silence.
Thank you, Counselor. I guess I would just suggest that maybe the first step is the city manager, county administrator conversations that you have, asking at that level, what would be helpful.
Okay.
And getting some sort of response back of probably a spectrum of what folks would like to do.
Me too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Counselor. I don't see any other hands raised. So thank you, much appreciated. Not a whole lot of questions because of all the good work you put in to get to this point. It does sound like we have an additional note to make in our priority list, both on the locks and the levy. So I didn't hear any objection to those things. So, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Betsy.
All right, next, we're gonna have a President's Work Group on Supportive Housing Services discussion. Between the meetings of the work group, as you know, have put together to make recommendations on SHS reform implementation. I have added time in these work sessions, agendas to report out on those meetings. My hope is that counselors use this time to reflect on the work group's discussions and share any questions or feedback you'd like for the Deputy Council President Simpson, Councilor Lewis, or I to carry into the next meeting. Last Monday, April 7th, the work group held its third meeting. And as you know, I was away, so the meeting was led by Deputy President Simpson and Commissioner West in my absence. I want to thank Commissioner Simpson, Councilor Simpson, for his show of leadership and call to action during that conversation, and to Councilor Lewis for actually the years of working on this topic, culminating in this work that I think is bringing us a lot closer as a region to understanding what we want to get out of this program. I'm going to hand off to Councilor Simpson to provide a brief overview of the last meeting and any additional reflections from Councilor Lewis.
Okay, thank you, President Peterson. First, I want to reflect on how we opened up the meeting last week, based in part on what staff were hearing in briefings, work group members between the second and first meetings. It began with some much needed clarity and directness over what this group and this region needs to keep in mind as we work together to make our collective efforts more effective. And to reiterate, if folks at the table were not there in good faith or to collaborate, they were free to excuse themselves. So in a polite way. We have the opportunity though, however, to do something that very few regions in the country can do, which is provide a well-coordinated and resourced regional system of care. We recognize that the complexity of the work and the pressure we're under has led to disagreements and misunderstandings, but we have to put that aside to work on the difficult issues together and bring back trust in our region's voters. So as we connected around a shared vision for more effectively addressing homelessness in the region with the support of SHS resources, we have a real opportunity and even a mandate to do things differently to establish a healthier regional system across sectors. That includes aligning health and recovery services, housing, economic development, and service provisions in the direction of solving our region's most pressing challenges. In addition, Commissioner West took some time to share his own thoughts and address feedback from the work group's mayors who requested we look into conducting regional systems review or audits to determine specifically what needs to be improved. But we'll have more on that in a minute as we get into discussion. The team pivoted on the agenda a bit before the April 7th meeting, hearing feedback that the work group members were hungry for a conversation that was more systems focused. Bringing on facilitation support was one of the ways we responded to the feedback, and we're hearing from work group members. We brought on Drawbridge Innovations, who you may recall provided facilitation support to the stakeholder advisory table process that informed COO Madrigal's recommendations to the council last year. At that meeting, The team from Drawbridge Innovations led the work group through breakout discussions that focused on questions to draw out themes that helped inform regional mission and vision statements. These questions included, what are the characteristics of a healthy regional system? What is our vision for success in the region? What shifts in thinking, action, and approach is needed to move from where we are to where we want to be? And we heard some emerging themes come out of those questions, which include being collaborative and regionally aligned with shared purpose, vision goals, and regional priorities. Important decisions are not made by ego or self-interest. Ensuring this alignment is connected through shared metrics and data that is accurate, real-time, and accessible to all to build transparency. And that systems has no wrongdoers, recognizing that homelessness has no boundaries and service levels should have the same standards of care and support regardless of where you are in the region or no matter what jurisdiction you're in. I'd like to open up the floor to Council President Peterson and Councilor Lewis to add any additional observations or themes that emerged out of this discussion.
Sure, thank you, Counselor. I think that the way that the meeting was conducted with facilitation in small groups was really productive. We were at tables of 4 and we had a really good mix so that every table had both electeds and non-elected community members and leaders, particularly from impacted communities at them. So one of the things that came out, I believe, was that we don't want to use this work group to actually write the KPIs, but we want to actually set the vision that will then allow the KPIs to come out. We were also able to go through a process where we talked about the current state and the future state and some of the changes that will be needed to move those. Because of how the facilitation worked, we weren't fully able to, as a group, put everything from future state onto the board, but we did get current state and challenges onto the board, and there felt like a lot of shared consensus on that. I think the last piece is that everybody in the room felt good around audit and review as a step forward. I had suggested that we respect the fact that there are elected and appointed auditors for our jurisdictions, and they should have their own role in this, but their scope is far beyond what they're able to do on this timeline. But I think the group will probably need to talk a little bit more about the scope of the audit. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Other than we were obviously joined by some folks participating virtually who struggled to connect, but they were able to share some of their thoughts individually and one-on-one with me as well.
I guess I'll just summarize where we're at. As you'll recall, as we're trying to move forward with getting coordinated and understanding of what we're trying to achieve with this program so that everybody has a shared, not just mission and vision, but shared definitions, which going into this was actually a problem. Not every county was using the same definition for population A and population B. And if we don't start at a framework of understanding that together, then we are headed in different directions and getting different results. I think the thing that I have noticed the most is that we have been very focused on getting folks housed, or temporary or permanent supportive housing, or keeping them in their homes. But we haven't gotten to the complete housing first model, which is the wraparound services. So there's still a lot to strive for in this program, and still a lot of people to serve, as you saw with the Multnomah County by name tracking that is now going on. The problem probably isn't any bigger than it really was, but it's bigger than we thought it was. based on the point in time count and estimations that were going on versus getting to actual data of who they're serving. I think the other big thing coming out of that is on the solution side is I would really like to see us focus as a goal on ensuring that every household and every person that is in the SHS program, no matter what county you're in, that they're going to have an individual service plan. They know both from the caseworker standpoint and from the customer, that we're the client, that clarifies how services will support their stabilization and inform system-wide resource planning. If we know that somebody is in a state that needs stabilization that would require 6 months of support, even if it's an estimate, versus 2 years, or somebody who is going to be permanently needing help, that helps us clarify the capacity of this program and start planning for services. But right now we don't know that. So I think getting to that type of understanding is important. And two, that the holistic approach of whether you're an individual, a business owner, a service provider, or implementing partner, everyone has a role to play, but also should know what they get as a benefit from this program. We have clearly not articulated how roles and responsibilities for everybody in this program and measures of success. So getting those two things is going to be really important to achieving a mission, which I think is as simple as reducing the flow into homelessness while increasing the flow out of homelessness. So I think we're making progress. I couldn't be happier with where we're at, honestly, with the show of support from the county commissioners across the region and the mayors and business, getting everybody at the table and having tough conversations out loud is probably the best thing for this program in order to make it stronger and achieve better results. So thank you for both Councilor Simpson and Councilor Lewis working on this in my stead. Looking forward to the next meeting. Any questions, councilors, on where we're at or what you'd like to see discussed? Councilor Juan.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. And thank you to you and Councilors Lewis and Simpson for your leadership on the committee. Really appreciate those updates. And I think I just had some questions and maybe concerns about what I heard around not having KPIs. Did I hear that correctly?
In the meeting, there was no time to get to KPIs. The conversation will continue and KPIs will be part of that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just a little concerned about the time. I think the audit and review, and then I guess waiting on the development of KPIs is a little concerning to me, because I do feel this sense of urgency, and I want to, armchair quarterback the whole process. But I think that just kind of like, I'd be interested in how we phase things out, with, the audit and things like that, because that could take a couple months, 6 to 8 months generally for an audit, and then having a process for KPIs. It just seems like we're really, pushing that timeline out. So yeah, what happens after we have those, and what happens, to make sure that those are all integrated into whatever we do next. I think that's my first question. And just kind of given, where we are in the timeline going through this process, I've been having conversations too, I think, in the public meeting before, we had talked about asking for wind down plans from our partners. And I also think that'd be valuable, because we're rapidly approaching that point of time where it'd be irresponsible if we don't ask for that, because it does take a long time to plan out, especially for our nonprofit providers, what that could mean in 3 or 4 years if we are winding down the program. I hope we don't, but I think it's wise to think about what would happen if we have to, so people had time to plan, so we don't have that sudden influx of folks that are back on the streets, and that the nonprofits can plan for staffing appropriately. So I guess my question is just, how does this all timeline, fit together? Because there's going to be multiple processes playing out, and I just want to make sure that we can get to a point of decision making of, we're doing this extension proposal or whatnot at a certain point. And I'm hearing all these great things, but how do we put them together?
All good questions.
Yeah, well, I can answer the first piece, at least the KPI piece. So in front of you, and I was gonna get to this as we closed out, there should be a worksheet. And Counselor Nolan, I'm hoping somebody emailed this to you so you can take a look at it as well. But this was the homework sheet that folks left out with in our last meeting so that they can not only identify the KPIs that they, we can get that process going, and instead of we do it at the next meeting, they got some homework to get it done. But then we also said we'll backfill that if you need staff support. And so staff has been on the ready, and I've also directed staff to reach out, be proactive, and help folks, identify, these KPIs, and if they're having trouble coming up with things or frameworks to help walk through with them. And so I can at least answer that first part, and I'll let Counselor or President Peterson take on the rest.
I think Counselor Lewis had something to add.
Oh, excuse me.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of overarching themes is that we want to get it right. So we actually want to come up with the thing that the KPI will point to, and then actually let experts word it, see what's measurable, see what actually matters within that bucket, which is why in the homework and in the way that we're framing things, we're trying to talk about the goal that we're getting to and what indicators we might already measure, so that then the technical staff will take it from there to formalize it in a KPI, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So it's not saying we're not doing it. I think we all would want to talk about which goals or measures seem important within the next few meetings.
And just your question about timing, there's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I think we all wish we could have done 5 years ago, right? So that we could have had this common understanding up front and not have it in the middle and the place where we have to make a big decision. But I think we're just gonna have to take it one step at a time, because I think we are on a need to move quickly, because that window is closing in order to be able to continue the program. The public trust needs to be built up, and the question is, how much do we need to accomplish now versus later, so that there is that ability to say, oh, enough reform is coming that I trust that this process will be better. And I'm not sure, I can't personally say I'm at that point where I feel like we've accomplished enough, but I see the end of the tunnel now.
Yeah.
Whereas there was no end of the tunnel about a month and a half ago. It was really dark and it was really murky. But the region has come together in a way that I have not seen in a long time on a big contentious issue. The county commissioners are stepping forward and they're taking responsibility in a way that they hadn't over the last 5 years. And the mayors are feeling, I don't want to speak on everybody's behalf, but they're engaged at the table in a way that they hadn't been allowed to be engaged with before. And the business community, again, is engaged at a table in a way they've never been before. The providers have a voice at a table. So what I'm getting back as feedback is, this is a great process. This is what we felt was needed. We feel like it's on track so far. And what's great is also that we're remaining open to all of these voices and their perspectives of what they need to feel confident, right? But I think we're walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
And it may take a lot more work. It may take another 2 months, and we're going to feel like, yeah, this is on the right track now. We can actually talk about reform and what it looks like, and clearly articulate outcomes and things that the way Drawbridge has put it, key shifts in things that we're going to be doing in order to accomplish better outcomes. I think we're getting close, but it's a building of trust just within this group, let alone the entirety of the voting public.
Understood. Yeah, and I don't want to shortchange or rush the trust building process, because I think that's, extremely valuable. And I do see like there's a pathway, and we know like how we want to land the plane. We just don't know when. But I think being able to like, stick that landing and having just some conversation and guidance about like we actually are on the clock and what that means, that would be more valuable for me. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
I feel like folks at the table are acutely aware that there is a window. Especially the providers, right, who have said that they don't want to, many of them have said we can't take on any new clients until we know what's going on.
Right.
So I think there's a sense of urgency, but there's also a sense of, as Councilor Lewis said, getting it right this time, and not just, as my Midwestern, half-assing it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Councilor Gonzalez, sorry. Welcome.
Thanks, President Peterson. Yeah, I was able to join at the top of the presentation. So I'm glad that I was able to make it for this part of the discussion. And well, first, thank you, President Peterson, for the work group, and Deputy President Simpson and Councilor Lewis. I am so grateful for your leadership on this work group and on asking the hard questions and setting this table. I agree with Councilor Huang on the urgency that we're feeling, but also that we need to get it right because the clock is ticking. I think just to be helpful here and to ask a new question, because I agree with everything that's been said, and specifically also want to make sure I ask about how we can use the existing resources that we have to do some of these like medium time horizon changes and improvements. Obviously we've been working through the potential reallocation of our administrative funds to accelerate some projects that we think could be really important in advancing the goals that are emerging with proposals. So I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering how, the Regional Investment Fund and some of the kind of the existing oversight committee processes, how we can get some of that work started in terms of investments. And the reason I bring that up is because unlike many other parts of our local government capacity, not just at Metro, but in other areas, SHS is an area that we do have resources that we can deploy. And so I guess I'm wondering if that's a question that the work group is talking about, and seeing if there's a way to unlock that, just because my understanding is that, we are working through our process, and I would love to be able to, similarly to how we're moving to allocate some money to Multnomah County, to be able to allocate some resources to Washington County and Clackamas County to accelerate some of these gaps that we're actively identifying as a region. But then also I know that there's been these other major priority areas that have been kind of in motion and going through the process. But I don't know. I feel like what I'm seeing through this work group that y'all have put together is that there's just this window and opportunity for leadership. I think people want to see leadership, and they want to see investment back that leadership. So that's the question I ask, and I'm wondering, Councilor Lewis, Simpson, and President Peterson, how can the council be supportive in those ways?
Thank you, Councilor. Just general overview. In terms of the ordinance and resolution, in order to move the administrative carryover funds, we are on track to at least get the Portland, Multnomah County amount underway as quickly as possible. They need to have that certainty in order to make their plans. Then we will work with Clackamas and Washington County on what their plan is, and then bring a resolution forward to the council as quickly as we can. But that's based on what they can identify as a need a one-time only, not programmatic expenditure. So I think for that portion, we're moving as quickly as we can on that. And the other question about the regional investment funds, I've asked Liam to come up and talk a little bit about. There is a wind down that will happen with TCPB, the Tri-County Planning Body, over time as we ramp up a new governance structure. And I don't know if you've put any thought into how they can play a role in helping fund whatever's coming out of this, which I think is the question.
Well, thank you very much. For the record, Liam Frost, Deputy Director of Housing here at Metro, pronouns he, him, and his. There's still a lot on the table of what we can and cannot do around the TCPB. I think from their own experience, and Councillor Lewis can either affirm or add to this, we're at a point now where a lot of the work that they put in is coming to fruition. Just last week, we had a presentation on the work of coordinating / integrating healthcare into housing and homeless services for the first time I've seen in my career, which has been fantastic. We have 6 goals, as you're all aware of. Each has an implementation strategy that will be approved by the end of this fiscal year. There will be ongoing regional funds supporting those goals. That doesn't mean to say that there are additional regional efforts that we can engage in or should engage in. I'm not going to list out a few right now at the risk of upending some of our partners, because we need to continue working with them. We need to do it together. We cannot do this alone. And if I may just add one more thing around the work group, some of the activity that you're perhaps not seeing at the work group is the staff-to-staff meeting in between. We're working really closely with our county partners and our City of Portland partners too, in a way that we haven't done before because of this work group. And we're gaining a lot of momentum from it too. So from a staff perspective, I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And can I even say optimistic?
There's a light.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Does that answer the question, Councilor Gonzalez?
It does. Thanks, President Peterson, and happy to hear y'all's perspective on that. Thank you.
No, and one of the goals of all of this was to start working as a region, both at the elected and the staff level, in a way that really we've seen it work in other arenas of what we work in, and try to take those lessons learned and apply it to this new responsibility that we have. And I'm pleased both at the work group level and at the staff level of the amount of trust that's being built. So thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Madam President. I'm curious to follow up on the comments that have been made today about working on KPMs, which, as I've heard them described, will apply to how work is performed and toward what goals if the reform is approved. Has there been any discussion at the work group about reforms and results that can be delivered before the voters are asked to vote on this?
So I think the answer to that is going to become clearer as, thank you, Liam, will become clearer as we go along of what's actually needed. These quote key shifts that we're looking at will obviously determine what the low hanging fruit is versus what the deeper changes that need to be made. If people don't actually have individualized plans in place now, I think that's a harder lift than it is to maybe coordinate the data that we are getting now from the counties and being able to articulate some of those analytics. So that would be my answer, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, you brought up individualized plans, and I think that's kind of a hot way to frame it right now, because each of our 3 counties has an individualized plan that they've adopted, but they're not in compliance necessarily with how they've managed to maintain and update their plan, both through active community advisory and their expectations about if it's a 1-year plan or a longer year plan.
I meant individuals, the clients. Sorry.
Cool. Thank you.
If I might follow up, I didn't explain my question well enough.
Okay.
I'm talking about voters who I think our research has shown and my absorbing information from my constituents in public meetings around the district I represent says that the public is really hungry for reforms with a capital R.
Mm-hmm.
And governance has some resonance, but I don't think that's what I'm hearing most people are looking for. They want to see, disruptive change toward good. And I'm wondering if the work group has talked at all about that. And, promises of not just we're going to re-govern ourselves differently, but we're going to do as Mayor Wilson is talking about, meet a goal of no one unhoused, unsheltered, and then move from that to something else. And whether his plan is the right one is certainly something that I think the work group can discuss, this council can discuss. But something bold that we can all take to the voters and say, we've learned some serious lessons and we've already started applying them.
I think you're going to start seeing that as we go along, but I don't think, I don't want to get ahead of the work group and what they come up with. But I do think that they know that they need to be more specific and be able to say what it is that people should be able to see happening outside their window. Right. And I think that's the first step towards what you're asking for. We're not there yet. To make a commitment, first we have to know what the goal is and then what it will take in terms of resources and time to get there in order to be able to make the commitment. Because we don't want to promise what was promised in the last campaign. Because that didn't come to fruition, right? So we need to be careful because we can't do that again. But I hear what you're asking for, which is different than what the campaign did. I'm just saying that has laid a groundwork for distrust.
I'm sure we'll have other times to discuss this. I'm not sure you're hearing what I'm asking for, or maybe it's that we're disagreeing.
I'm just not sure how fast we can get to what you're asking for in terms of a commitment from the entirety of all three counties and from everybody at the table. We will get there, but it takes time to figure out what it is we're trying to achieve with the program and articulate that so clearly that you can actually make a commitment. We're getting there. All right.
And will we be there before we ask voters to vote on this?
With any luck, we will have to see how far we can get. And then we'll have to make a decision as a region when we're ready to go out.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you again for that conversation. And I appreciate the questions and the push on everything. All right. The next work group is Monday, April 21st. They'll be focusing, they had homework. They will be meeting in small group discussions to draw out more themes that can inform the goals and the KPIs, what they should look like. We will also provide an update on the interest from Commissioner West and other work group members to dig into the kinds of audits and evaluations that have been conducted already to date as a way of considering what we would evaluate that would help inform our reform effort. And obviously, I'm going to be very interested in knowing out of those audits, what has been done to fulfill those recommendations from the audits and what hasn't. And at our request, staff conducted extensive briefings with nearly every work group member between the last two meetings, and we've been working to incorporate their feedback and concerns into planning the rest of the meeting timeline, agendas, materials, and facilitation, as well as other elected officials and interested parties that are not at the table. Staff have been doing a yeoman's work talking to all of these folks and bringing them up to speed. I want to speak to one thing we've been hearing from our work group members, the questions about the scope in place in council's decision-making process, which we were just talking about. I want to emphasize that the work group is not a decision-making body. It is working to make recommendations to the Metro Council. And what these 4 pillars of a regional mission, vision, goals, and KPIs could be for a reformed regional SHS system, whether that's for the next 5 years or the program today or beyond. And we will need their help to think about how to prepare for the transitions that will come no matter what decisions this council makes. At its core, strengthening our relationships and collaboration between our partners and stakeholders is critical to rebuilding back the public trust and confidence among voters. This is what we aim to do at the table. So we'll be bringing back to you another update after the 21st. Anything for the good of the order on this? All right, thank you again. All right, we'll move on to Chief Operating Officer Communication.
Thank you, Council President Peterson. Council may have noticed a little Parks and Nature theme to my updates the last few times, and it's because there's so much cool stuff happening out there. I had not heard about this and wanted to share, wanted to give a boost to the 2025 City Nature Challenge and encourage folks to take part by attending one of the wonderful events hosted by our Parks and Nature. This is the 10th anniversary of the City Nature Challenge. It started off as a competition between Los Angeles and San Francisco and has grown into an international event. Hundreds of cities and thousands of participants have observed millions of species in what is now the world's largest community science event, which is just so rad. So between April 25th and 28th, you can participate by documenting Greater Portland's nature and uploading photos or sound clips of plants or wild animals to a free app called iNaturalist. You can join one of our parks events. That's a way to participate, or just go out and be in the weather and participate in science. I think it's especially important in this time when science feels like it's a little bit under attack, and it's still really important. So this is a local way that people can participate.
Thank you. Councilors, any communication? Councilor Simpson.
Yeah, just a quick, just want to check in with y'all. I missed y'all last Thursday. I was out in Austin, Texas, speaking at the Housing Works housing conference. We are their case study in all of things. They were curious about our SHS and affordable housing bonds and how things are going and the progress we've made. But then also we talked a little bit about the politics that are happening now with where we're going, and had an opportunity to share the platform with a brother from Chicago named Enrique Castillo from CMAP, and learned a little bit about how they're also planning in Illinois as well. So it was it's always good to go back down to Texas. Always is. And I had a good time while I was down there. So I just want to report that back to you all.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Anybody else? Oh, Councilor Wong.
Thank you. Apologies for being a few minutes late today. I was at Multnomah County and they voted unanimously to approve the 82nd Avenue locally preferred alternative. And that's, making its way through all our jurisdictional partners, a lot of excitement and support. And we'll, I think, be voting on that in the next couple month or two. So next month. Yeah, excited to bring that to our council.
I didn't catch, I'm sorry, because of the reverberation. What was the project?
Oh, the 82nd Avenue
gotcha.
transit project. Yeah, it's going through the LPA for those.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right, seeing no other hands raised, I will adjourn our meeting, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 22nd.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Oh, Councilor Gonzalez.
I'm so sorry, President Peterson. I thought I'd raised my hand, but the phone let me down. I also joined late, and I apologize. I'm not sure if much update was provided on JPACT from this morning, but I want to make sure I do a quick. Great. So I don't want to. If most of it was already covered, that's great. But just high level, we did have JPACT this morning. We had a lot of robust conversation around regionalism. and around our MPO certification, which it sounds like was brought up for discussion. So again, apologize for repeating that. I just wanted to make sure we talked about it. And then we had Betsy's presentation, which y'all saw, received a great deal of public comment on RFFA, step 1A, which is our bond proposal, and the step 2 projects. And folks can still give public testimony and give us comment on project priorities and until the end of the month. And we really encourage folks to do that. Yeah, so just want to make sure I cover that under the umbrella of JPACT and in our role as an MPO, and appreciate Councilors Simpson and Lewis for just being wonderful. So that's all.
All right. See you back here, April 22nd, 10:30 a.m. and it'll be Happy Earth Day. See you then.